Thanks. All right. Good morning, everyone. Let's talk about Inertia today. So Inertia is a JavaScript framework for building server-driven single-page apps. Probably a bit of a vague description, but I hope that will become clear in the next half hour. So can you raise your hand? How many of you have already heard of Inertia or kind of like know what it is? OK, that's already a large number. And how many of you have actually already used it? Also larger than I expected, actually. Cool. So about me, I'm Sebastian De Deyne. I'm a front-end-ish developer at Spatie, also do some back-end, some design. I maintain Inertia's official React adapter, and I'm also co-maintaining a bit, helping out with issues and stuff of the main main Inertia repository. Before we get started, I want to establish some context of projects I work on day to day. So mostly at Spatie, we work on complex business apps that have a lot of complex forms. Most of them require authentication to get in, so SEO isn't really a huge concern in the projects that we're really spending a lot of time on. We also don't really need to build a lot of shared public APIs, like build one API and have it be consumed by mobile apps and web apps. So mostly we can just use a traditional MVC framework and build some sort of monolith for our projects. So if you can relate to some of these, then I think Inertia and this talk will be extra relevant to you, because that's where I'm coming from. We're also using Laravel with a combination of React and TypeScript on the front end to build applications. But I'll be using Vue for all the examples today, because I assume that's what most people are more familiar with. I want to start off with a few examples of some components I've built over, I guess, the few years of Spatie. So something typical that comes back a lot is like a form with a checkbox that if you click it, it changes the state of the form. Some fields need to be disabled. Some things need to be pre-filled. Another piece of user interface is a live search with Algolia. If you start typing or if you change one of the parameters, it's going to fire off an AJAX request and immediately load the results. Another example is a drop-down menu. If you use the arrow keys, you can use the arrow keys to navigate. It's all accessible. You can use the hotkey to open it. Now, all these components have one thing in common, and that's that they all heavily rely on JavaScript to build. A modern UI probably needs quite some JavaScript, whether you like it or not. We're building applications with server-side MVC frameworks. So most of us probably Laravel, some Symfony, Ruby on Rails. And they also apply their own templating language on the back end. In the case of Laravel, that's Blade, but you also could be working with Twig or ERB or whatever. The thing is, these templating languages, they are made for HTML, and then we sprinkle some JavaScript over them afterwards. But the interfaces I'm building, like JavaScript is really a first-class citizen there, so I kind of want a piece of technology that also treats it as a first-class citizen. JavaScript isn't really part of the stack of our server-side framework. So kind of a natural evolution to this is thinking, all right, let's just build a single-page application, because then we can just do everything of our view in JavaScript. Single-page applications have some awesome features. So this is what I'm looking for. I want to build my entire UI in JavaScript. You can also consume existing APIs. So if you need to build an application that is also going to be consumed by mobile apps or something, you can just reuse that API instead of building something twice on the back end. Spas also can have offline support, which can be a really useful feature. And if scalability is an issue, then they could reduce server load in some contexts, because you could statically host them. So going over these bullets, build your UI in JavaScript, that's something I really want to be able to do. Consuming existing APIs can be useful, but like I said before, not that relevant to the projects I'm working on a day-to-day basis. The same for offline support and less server load. These are, to me, really niche features. These are things that clients don't often need. So while these are nice things to have, they don't provide that much value to me. On the other hand, a single-page application adds a lot of complexity to your project. You need to implement client-side routing now. You need to do data fetching through an API. Because you're storing data on the client too, you probably need some sort of state management solution. Libraries like Vuex or Redux are really beautiful libraries, but they add a lot of complexity to your application. You'll also need to recreate quite some browser behavior, like getting the back button to work the way you want. It's all possible, but it adds a lot of overhead to development. So if you compare this list up here to the previous list we were looking at, it's not really worth the trade-off for me. So then I'd rather stick with the server-side templates and add JavaScript afterwards. If I were to make a wish list of everything I want, I would have my view layer entirely in JavaScript. I wouldn't need an API unless I need it for other reasons. As a bonus, I don't really like writing tons of AJAX endpoints for my views either. It would be cool if we could reduce those. And I'd really want to keep routing and data fetching on the server, because that's where all the business complexity lives. So the more of the other complexity we can keep there, in my opinion, the better. So this is where Inertia kicks in. Inertia tries to solve this with two key features. First of it being no server-side templating. If you look at a blade view in an application without Inertia, so you might have written something like this at some point. You have a mix of HTML, and you'll be rendering one or more view components. And then actually most of the interesting part of this view lives inside the view component. You have a controller which just returns a view user's index, and you pass down the users to that view. If we were to use Inertia for this, the controller looks like this. So instead of view, you call the Inertia function. And that's actually all you have to do. On the server, you don't really need to do any big mental shift to use Inertia. Your blade view is going to look like this. Your blade view simply isn't needed anymore. It doesn't exist anymore, because Inertia immediately is going to send down the data to the view component. So this is an example of view component. You have a template. Your view component accepts props, and those props will be immediately injected from the controller into the view component. The second key feature of Inertia is no full page refreshes. So this is what really gives Inertia applications really like that single page app smooth feel. Here's a short video of an Inertia demo. So we're going to visit the Ping CRM, which is a demo which is open source. We're going to visit the dashboard, and then we're going to check out one of the pages. Now, what does this look like in the network tab? The first request is going to do a full HTML request. We're going to receive server-rendered HTML with some data from the server. The second request, the one you saw without any page refreshes, is going to use an AJAX request. This is probably a bit small, but we're going to look at this zoomed in a real browser later. So this is really important. Your first visit will always return HTML, and every subsequent visit will return JSON. Inertia isn't really a framework. It's more like a core library with a collection of adapters. You have Inertia.js, the core JavaScript library. Then you're going to use a client-side adapter and a server-side adapter. The client-side adapter is kind of a bridge between your client-side framework, like Vue or React, and the Inertia core. And those components are going to be able to do the AJAX requests. The server-side adapter is going to enable you to return responses that can either return HTML or JSON, depending on the context. On the server side, there's an official adapter for Laravel. Someone in the community also made one for Symfony. I think he's at the conference here, Hannes Vermeeren. And someone is also working on a Cold Fusion adapter, actually. On the client side, there are official adapters for Vue.js, React, and Svelte. So now we're going to check out some real code with Laravel and Vue.js. All right, mirror displays. OK. So what we're going to build is the simple admin interface for posts. It's a very boring topic, but I picked something everyone would know so we could focus on the technical details and not really what's going on in the application. Zoom in a bit. OK, so we have an overview of all posts here for a fake website called inertianews.com. And we can click on a post to edit the post, and we can also add new posts. So it's a pretty simple application. The first thing you need to do to get started with Inertia is install the server-side adapter. So in composer.json, we have Inertia.js, Inertia Laravel, version 0.1 for now. The package will take care of the service provider's auto-registration, so that's pretty much all you need to do. The single step you still need to go through is create some sort of skeleton template. By default, it's going to look for an app.blade.php. And you need to register the @inertia directive here. The @inertia directive will be replaced with a div, and we'll see what that looks like exactly later on. The routes of our application, let's look at the web routes here. There's nothing special going on here. We have a login route, a logout route. We're using a resource controller for our posts. I also added a little restore endpoint since we're using soft deletes. Now the post controller itself, we have an index method, which is going to return posts based on the query string. So we can filter by status here. We also have a little search box here. I'm going to retrieve the posts. Also going to retrieve some extra data to show in the view. So the counts for the published posts, the draft posts, the trashed posts. These are going to be displayed here. And then we're going to return an inertia view with the index component for posts and pass down the data. So this looks just like you'd be building something with Blade and Laravel. The create method too, nothing special here. I'm using the edit view for both create and edit. In the context of creating something, I'm going to pass down an empty post. And the store view actually has nothing to do with inertia at all. It just receives a post request. We're going to create a new post for that user, redirect to the edit page, and add a success message that the post was created. One more thing I want to note about this dummy application here, I added a little piece of slow down middleware, which is going to add a slight delay to every request to make it feel more like an application that's hosted on a server than like these instant requests that you get in local development. First thing I'm going to do is open the network tab here. Oh, don't need view, network, and zoom in a bit. All right, I'm going to refresh this page. And as we saw a minute ago, the first request is going to return an HTML document. In this HTML document, the @inertia directive got replaced by a div with an ID of app. And it has a data page attribute, which will contain the component and a bunch of other data. So we're rendering the posts index component. Make one size bigger. And here is another piece of JSON blobs with data that gets sent from the server to the client. Now, a subsequent request, so if I click a post here, and I go down, that's this one here, is going to return JSON instead. So the request for this page contains, let's look at the request headers, an X inertia header right here. So that's how the server is going to know I need to return JSON now instead of that HTML document. Previewing the response, this looks exactly the same as the data page attribute we saw a minute ago. So it has a post, and it contains all the props. So this is the data that you send from your controller or your application down to the view. On the front end of things, let me make this bigger. This needs to be a lot bigger, actually. OK. Package.json. We installed two dependencies, the Inertia core library, and in this case, the Inertia view adapter. In our app.js, we are installing Inertia as a view plugin for some extra functionality. Then we are looking for an element with an ID, with an app ID on the page to render Inertia at that place. We're going to parse the data page attribute we just saw in the HTML document and send it to the Inertia app as its initial state. One thing you do need to configure is how Inertia needs to find components. So in this case, I'm using dynamic imports. This name will have the posts index or posts edit we just saw. So it's going to look for a JavaScript file, pages/post/index or edit in this case. So if you look at our files here, these exist. We have pages, posts, and edit, and index. Cool thing about this is that you actually get code splitting by default, since it's dynamic imports. So this is really a really good win for performance of your application. Let's take a look at the index view here. Go all the way up. First thing you notice is we're not going to use any A tags, but we're going to use inertia link components instead. These are provided by the inertia view library. These behave just like an A tag. You add an href with a URL, and if you click the link, that's the URL you're going to go to. So I'm also using these inertia link components for the status filters. So go back to all posts. This published here is simply a link to the page with, click here, all right, with status equals published. One thing here, I'm going to zoom this in again. If I scroll down a bit and I hit draft, it looks like a full page. It looks like we're visiting a new page. So we're jumping all the way back up to the top like you'd be visiting a new page. I want to give this a more app-like feel, that these filters only apply to the table and don't really touch the rest of the experience of the page. One thing Inertia has for that is you can add a preserve scroll attribute to inertia link. So I'm going to select these 4 inertia links for the filters and add preserve scroll equals true. I'm going to save that, refresh. Now if I click published, it stays in place. So this already feels more like some sort of single page application or rich user experience. I'm going to need to do the same for the search box here. If I search for here, first of all, we jump to the top of the page, which makes it feel less smooth. But second of all, whenever we search for something, the box loses focus, so you can't really keep typing in the box. Let's look at how the search field is built. We have a text field, type is search, with vModels equals search. In our data of the view component, we are declaring a reactive search attribute. And we're going to watch that attribute. Whenever the search string changes, we're going to trigger an inertia visit. So you can also trigger an inertia visit programmatically instead of using the inertia link component. We're debouncing this every 250 milliseconds, so you don't fire an HTTP request on every single keystroke. So the first thing we're going to do here is, like we did a minute ago, add the preserve scroll property, preserve scroll true. Now, if I refresh and start typing here, then, all right, our page is staying in place. That's a good thing, but we're still losing focus on the search box. There's a way to tell Inertia, like, look, I'm going to do a request, but instead of going to an entirely new page, I'm kind of going to update the current page. You can tell Inertia to preserve the state of the current page. So if I say preserve state true, refresh again. If I start typing now, then my search box is going to stay nicely focused. Next, we're doing a few queries on every page here. So we have the query for the post, which is obviously necessary. But as we saw in the post controller, let me go back there, we also have these queries for the counts of the posts. So when I'm searching for a post, I don't really care about updating these counts. I want to make this request as efficient as possible. I only want to retrieve the posts. And to the inertia link, you can also add an only attribute. And we're going to say, OK, I only care about posts. I'm going to save this and refresh. Now, if I type here and look at the network request, so post search natu, the props will only contain the posts in the response. So we already saved some bytes by sending less down. But the thing is, these queries are still being fired in the post controller. So Inertia has this thing to lazily evaluate the data you're going to send down. So if we wrap these counts in a simple callable, so we say function, and we're going to return this array instead of immediately executing all those queries. So now we have a query count of 7. And if we search now, then we can see it's only 3 instead of 7. So these queries aren't going to be executed anymore unless your component explicitly wants this data to be sent down again. So Inertia is a really good fit for things like data tables, for retrieving data, filtering data. Now let's take a look at what it looks like for posting data. So in the edit page, let's go to the code there, posts, edit. We have a few text fields. Go all the way up. Text field to add the title, and a text area field for the content. So I'm using vModel here with a form property. Let's go to the data of this component, go all the way down. So we have a form here with a title and a content value. This will be pre-filled by the content of the current posts first, if there is one. And what we're going to do is all these publish buttons and stuff are also Inertia links. So if I go to that publish button, let me search for publish here. This is the one we're looking for. We have a save draft button, which uses an Inertia link. It's going to post to the posts endpoint. We can also specify a method. So this isn't only for get requests, but also post, put, patch, delete, whatever you want. And I'm going to send data to the server. So I'm going to send all the form data that we have in our view component. And I'm also going to say I want to save this as a draft. The same for publish. Send all the form data and set it as published. Next, if we keep this title empty and hit enter, and publish, then we get an error. The title field is required. So where is this error coming from? In our view, in the text field, we're passing down this weird thing, page errors title. Inertia also has a way to globally share data to all views. In our app service provider, I have an Inertia share call, and I'm sharing all different kinds of data that we want globally available. We have the authenticated user, a flash message if there's one present, and also an errors key, which will pull the errors out of the session and send it down. All of the data you're sending down from the server to the client will be available under the page key. This is something the Inertia View plugin does for you. So this kind of works just like you're used to in Blade. In Blade, you also have this global errors variable. Here, you also have something similar if you implement it. All right, one more small feature I want to show off. If I make a new post, I'm going to close this here. I start typing, hello, Laracon. Now, if I navigate somewhere else, so back to all posts, and I hit back, then I lost my progress. This is something that browsers are really good at. Browsers keep the previous form state. So if you hit the back button, then you wouldn't have lost your progress. With Inertia, you also can say that you want to remember specific data. So I'm going to specify here, I want to remember the form attribute here. I'm going to save it and refresh. Now if I type here Laracon, go to all posts and hit back, the state will be restored. Now, this isn't just using local storage. This is actually tied to this specific visit. So if I go to all posts again and add new, instead of using the back button, it won't be here. So this is exactly how you'd expect a browser to behave. One more thing, I'm going to hit log out here. So something went wrong. I used the GET request instead of POST for logout. When Inertia receives a non-Inertia response, it's going to render it in a modal. This is very useful for debugging. So instead of, normally it can be really hard to debug AJAX requests because you don't have the whoops page. But here, all your requests are going to be rendered somehow in the view. So this is really great to have during debugging. All right, back here. OK. Let me change the mirroring issue. How does this work? OK. Play. All right, so what did we go through now? A few features from Inertia. You can map controller actions to JavaScript components. So that's something I was really looking for, to streamline that whole thing. You get turbolinks like navigation. It can preserve page state and scroll state. You can partially reload data. It can also remember state for you on a specific page. And it also does some stuff to help you out with asset versioning to ensure that users will always be on the latest version of your application. But unfortunately, we don't have time to go through that now. What makes Inertia great for me? So development experience, no context switching anymore during development. This sounds like something small, but it's really huge. No more thinking, was this stored in the blade file or a view file or whatever. It's just always you have your server and you have your view files. And there's nothing in between anymore. That's pretty much just noise in this context. You also don't need to write as many AJAX endpoints anymore. Like for the data table, in a traditional application, you might have to add a few extra endpoints to like filter on status or search. You can all bundle this in one controller action with Inertia. Inertia keeps things snappy for your users, no full page refreshes anymore, and it also doesn't break browser behavior like spas do, or at least you need to invest a lot in a single page application to get it all fixed. Now, is Inertia safe for production? It is tagged 0.1, but yes, it is considered safe to use in production. The reason why it's not 1.0 yet is because we're still experimenting with looking for new features and stuff, but it is definitely stable. At Spatie, we're building 2 very big projects with it yesterday. Later, Marcel and Freek are going to be talking about Flare, and the application is entirely built with Inertia, so maybe keep that in mind. To close off, a few resources. On GitHub, check out the Inertia.js organization. A full website with a lot of docs are coming soon. Inertia.js on Twitter is at Inertia.js. Check out Jonathan Reining's Twitter. He is the creator of Inertia, so he's tweeting out a lot about that too. I was Sebastian De Deyne. Check out my website for some blog posts on similar topics, and follow me on Twitter at Seb De Deyne. I'll be around the conference for the rest of the day and at the After Dark, so feel free to talk to me about anything Inertia, React, or whatever related. Thank you.